I woke up that morning to the sound of her laughter. Soft, easy, unguarded. The kind of laughter that used to belong only to me. For a split second, I smiled, thinking she was on a call with her sister again. But then I heard a low voice respond, a man's voice. Deep, intimate, the kind of tone that belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be there. My chest tightened. The clock on my nightstand read 6:43 a.m. The curtains were drawn just enough to let in a faint line of dawn light cutting across our bedroom wall. The laughter stopped. Silence filled the air again, and I heard the faint rustle of movement. My mind raced. We didn't have guests. I had come home late from a business trip, just last night. She hadn't even kissed me properly when I got in, just a distracted peck, a mumbled good night, and a claim of being too tired. Now, sitting up slowly, I strained my ears. The voice was gone. Then a faint ping, a message notification. I got out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and walked toward the door. My heart was thudding so hard it made my ribs ache. When I peeked into the hallway, there was nothing unusual, just a faint aroma of coffee drifting from the kitchen. I forced a breath, shook my head, trying to tell myself I was overthinking. I'd been working too much. She had been distant lately. Yes, but maybe it was stress. Everyone had dry spells. Everyone had off weeks. I walked toward the kitchen. She was there, Maya, standing by the counter, her hair loose, wearing that white robe I bought her last Christmas. Her back was to me, and her phone lay face down on the counter. She turned when she heard my footsteps, smiling in that familiar, almost mechanical way she had lately. "Morning," she said. "You up early?" "Yeah," I replied, watching her too closely. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded, pouring coffee into a mug and handing it to me. "Jet lag." "Maybe," I said, taking it but not drinking. Her eyes didn't meet mine. I could feel something hanging between us, invisible, but heavy, like humidity before a storm. We stood there in that quiet kitchen, pretending to be normal. The smell of coffee, the sound of the fridge hum, the faint hiss of the kettle. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. My mind kept replaying that voice. I almost asked who she was talking to, but I stopped myself. I didn't want to seem paranoid. That's what happens when you've been married 8 years. You start explaining away your gut feelings. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a video she was watching. Maybe I imagined it. At 8 a.m., she kissed my cheek before heading out for yoga. She never used to do yoga. It was something she'd picked up 6 months ago, the same time she started locking her phone and taking her car instead of her friends. I told myself she deserved her own space, that trust meant not checking every move. When the door closed, I stood there for a long time. The silence pressed down on me until I finally sat at the dining table and stared at the mug she'd used. Lipstick mark on the rim. My wife, beautiful, composed, disciplined. The kind of woman everyone thought had it all together. I thought I knew her. But lately, there was someone else in her eyes, someone I didn't recognize. That's when I noticed it. Her phone charger on the counter. She'd forgotten it. A small thing, but Maya never forgot anything. That woman planned her days like a general preparing for war. My heart picked up again. I hesitated, staring at the empty counter. Then I walked to our bedroom, grabbed her spare iPad from the nightstand drawer. It was synced to her messages. I told myself I wouldn't do it, that it wasn't who I was. But my thumb hovered over the unlock button anyway. The screen lit up. Messages. Dozens of them. A name I didn't recognize. Ethan. I tapped the thread. The first few were harmless enough. Gym reminders, jokes, photos of coffee cups and sunsets. Then I scrolled further. You made me crazy last night. Can't stop thinking about your hands on me. I wish I could wake up next to you instead of pretending again. The words blurred for a second as I tried to breathe. My fingers tightened around the iPad. I felt cold, detached, like I wasn't in my own body. There were pictures, too. Not naked, but intimate. A selfie of her biting her lip. A shirtless man with familiar arms. The timestamps went back months. No, not months. Years. 2 years. I stared at the date on one of the earliest messages. It was a week after our 5th anniversary trip, the one where she said she'd never been happier. I set the iPad down gently. My heart was a wild drum inside me. Every sound in the house became sharp, distorted. I could hear the clock ticking like a hammer. For a moment, all I could think was, how? When? Why? The usual questions, the ones everyone asks when the world tilts beneath them. But underneath that was something darker, a quiet, almost calm sense of humiliation. How many times had I held her hand while she was thinking of someone else? How many nights had I kissed a stranger and called her my wife? The door clicked open downstairs. Panic surged through me. She was back, early. I grabbed the iPad, locked it, shoved it back in the drawer, and sat on the edge of the bed, pretending to scroll through my own phone. She walked in, her cheeks flushed, hair damp like she'd been running. She froze for a fraction of a second when she saw me there. "You're still home?" she asked, a little too quickly. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady in a way that scared even me. Had some calls cancelled. "Oh," she said, setting down her bag. "I'm just going to shower." She didn't meet my eyes again. As she walked into the bathroom, I caught a faint scent. Not her perfume. Something stronger. A man's cologne. I sat there, staring at the closed door. Every sound, the water turning on, the soft thud of her clothes hitting the floor, burned into me. I wanted to storm in, to scream, to demand why, but I didn't. Instead, I sat perfectly still, feeling something inside me splinter. For the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of how easily she had fooled me. And worse, how much of our life might have been a lie from the start. The shower ran for nearly half an hour. I sat there the entire time, motionless, staring at the space where her robe had been tossed over the chair. My mind replayed every detail. The texts, the photos, the 2 years that stretched behind those messages like a trail of ash. When she finally came out, wrapped in a towel, she froze for a second when she saw me still sitting there. Her eyes flickered, a hint of something, guilt, fear, calculation. She masked it fast. "You're still here?" she asked again, forcing a light tone. "Didn't you say you had a meeting?" "I cancelled," I said quietly. "Felt like staying home." "Oh." She turned away, drying her hair, pretending not to notice the way I was watching her every move. The towel slipped slightly, and I noticed a faint mark on her shoulder, small, pink, shaped like a half-moon. A bite mark. It felt like the air being punched out of me. She caught me looking, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then tugged the towel tighter and said, "I burned myself with a hair curler." I wanted to laugh. My throat was too tight to manage it. Instead, I said, "You should be more careful." Her eyes darted to me, searching my face. I could tell she was trying to read whether I knew something. I gave her nothing. Years of business negotiations had taught me how to keep my expression neutral. Now, that mask was all that kept me from falling apart. When she left the room, I stood and went to the bathroom. Her clothes were still in a heap by the sink. Leggings, tank top, a hoodie I didn't recognize. I picked it up and smelled it. It wasn't hers. It smelled faintly of sandalwood and musk. The same scent I'd noticed when she'd walked in. I stared at it for a long time, the fabric hanging limp in my hands, before tossing it back onto the pile. I felt sick. That night, I didn't confront her. I couldn't. Instead, I watched her move through the house, calm and efficient, cooking dinner, asking if I wanted wine, talking about a movie she'd seen with friends. Every word was poisoned dressed as normalcy. At the table, she smiled and said, "You're quiet tonight. Something wrong." I wanted to tell her everything I'd seen, everything I knew, but I couldn't form the words. "Just tired," I said. "You work too much," she murmured, reaching across to touch my hand. Her skin was warm, soft, familiar, the same hands that had typed those messages to him. I felt revulsion coil in my gut, but I didn't pull away. "Maybe you're right," I said. She smiled, and for a moment I saw the woman I used to know, the one who'd fallen asleep on my shoulder during road trips, the one who'd cried during stupid romantic movies. And then it hit me how well she could fake love. Later, when she went to bed, I sat alone on the couch, staring at the dark screen of the TV. The house felt haunted. Every picture frame, every shared memory suddenly looked staged. I thought about the day we met, The bookstore, her smile, the way she said she didn't believe in love at first sight, but something about me felt familiar. Now, I wondered if it had all been a script. Around midnight, I heard her phone buzz upstairs. I waited. 10 minutes later, I crept up quietly. She was asleep, the faint glow of a phone lighting the nightstand. My pulse hammered in my throat as I reached for it. Face ID. Locked. I remembered her passcode, our anniversary date. It didn't work. She'd changed it. I stared at the screen, the rejection message burning into my brain. That small, simple act, changing the passcode, told me everything. She didn't even bother pretending anymore. I left the room quietly and went to my study. I opened my laptop, logged into our phone plan account. I'd never done that before. Maya handled all the bills. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through the call logs. His number was everywhere. Late-night calls, random weekday afternoons, weekends when she told me she was visiting her mother. Hundreds of them. The earliest one was from 23 months ago. 2 years. She'd been cheating for 2 years, a full quarter of our marriage. I leaned back in the chair, covering my face with my hands. For a long time, I didn't move. The quiet in the room became unbearable. Eventually, I opened the drawer and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. I hadn't touched it in months. I poured a glass and stared at the amber liquid trembling in the light of the desk lamp. It was strange how grief didn't always come as tears. Sometimes it was just this, a stillness so deep it felt like drowning. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. A note on the counter. Went to yoga. Don't forget to eat something. I tore it in half and threw it away. I spent that day driving. Nowhere in particular, just away. The city blurred past, unfamiliar. Every traffic light felt like a test of whether I'd stop or keep going. My mind kept circling the same questions. Why hadn't I noticed sooner? Did she ever love me? Was everything we built a lie? By evening, I ended up at a small park by the lake. It was a place we used to go when we were first dating. I sat on the bench where I'd once told her I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I almost laughed. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of wet leaves and cold water. My phone buzzed. A message from her. Hey, I'll be late tonight. Dinner with friends after yoga. Don't wait up. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then, for the first time, I replied, Have fun. You deserve it. I didn't know why I wrote that. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd sense something in the words. Maybe I just wanted to test if guilt could cross a text message. It didn't. She heart-reacted the message and went silent. When I finally went home that night, I couldn't bring myself to go into our bedroom. I slept on the couch. The house felt too quiet, too empty. The next morning, she walked downstairs, pretending not to notice I hadn't slept in bed. She was wearing a soft smile, casual clothes, and that perfume she only wore on special occasions. Big meeting today. I asked. She froze for just a second. Yeah, lunch with some clients. Which ones? She hesitated. You don't know them. I nodded slowly. Right. I probably don't. She gave a quick smile and left. This time, I followed. Not immediately. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and heading out. I kept my distance, staying a few cars behind. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like some pathetic shadow chasing the truth. She didn't drive toward downtown where her office was. She drove west, toward the quieter part of the city, toward the hotels. My grip on the wheel tightened. My heart was pounding, but there was a strange calm underneath it, a cold determination. When she pulled into the parking lot of the Amber Light Inn, my worst fear took shape in front of me like a living thing. She parked. A few minutes later, a man walked up to her car. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair. She smiled, the same smile that used to undo me completely, and he leaned in, kissed her cheek. They walked into the hotel together. And that was the moment I realized, whatever marriage I thought I had, whatever life I believed in, it had died long before I ever noticed. It was never real. It was just a story I'd been living in alone. I didn't confront her that day. I couldn't. I just sat in my car outside the Amber Light Inn, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I watched through the windshield as they disappeared inside, hand in hand, their movements casual, familiar, like a couple who had done this 100 times. A married man sitting outside a hotel watching his wife meet another man. It felt surreal, pathetic even. The kind of story people whisper about but never believe could happen to them. Yet here I was, breathing it in, tasting the metallic tang of betrayal like blood in my mouth. I stayed there for an hour, maybe 2. My phone buzzed twice with work calls I ignored. The only thing that mattered was that door, and the moment they would come out. Around noon, they did. Maya was laughing again. The sound reached me through the car window, muffled but sharp. She brushed her hair back, leaned in, and kissed him full on the lips before heading toward her car. He smacked her lightly on the hip, and she giggled like a teenager. I felt something twist inside me, something that wasn't quite rage and wasn't quite heartbreak. It was both, tangled together in a knot I couldn't untie. I didn't follow her home. I couldn't stomach watching her walk back into our life, pretending everything was normal. Instead, I started the car and drove. No direction, just motion. My mind was chaos, fragments of memories, lies, small inconsistencies that suddenly made perfect sense. The work dinners, the late-night emails, the weekend she said she was visiting her sister but came back with perfume I didn't recognize. I pulled into a rest stop somewhere outside the city and just sat there. For the first time since it started, I allowed myself to feel it fully. The humiliation, the loss, the realization that I wasn't just betrayed. I'd been living inside a carefully crafted illusion. I called my friend Daniel. He'd be my best man, one of the few people I trusted completely. "Hey," I said when he picked up. My voice sounded wrong, like someone else's. "Alex, you okay, man? You sound off." "I found out Maya's been seeing someone," I said quietly, "for a long time." There was silence on the other end, then a soft exhale. "How long are we talking?" 2 years. Jesus Christ. "I saw them today," I continued, "at a hotel." He swore under his breath. "Do you have proof?" "Enough," I said. "Texts, photos, her call history." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to confront her. The other part just wants to disappear. "Don't do anything stupid," Daniel said. "You need to calm down. Think this through. You can't confront her like this. You'll explode. Come by tonight. We'll talk." I almost agreed, but something in me resisted. "No," I said. "I need to handle this myself." He sighed. "Promise me you won't do anything crazy." I didn't answer. I ended the call and just sat there, staring at my reflection in the car mirror. I barely recognized the man staring back, eyes hollow, jaw clenched, skin pale. When I got home that evening, she was there. She'd changed into sweat, sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said with that practiced warmth. "How was your day?" I stood by the doorway, watching her. My voice felt like gravel when I finally spoke. "Where were you today?" She looked up, blinking innocently. "Yoga." "Why?" "Then lunch with friends." "Yes," she said, hesitation creeping into her tone. "Why are you asking?" I didn't answer. I just walked closer. She frowned, setting her phone down. "Alex, what's going on?" I reached into my pocket and placed a forgotten charger on the table, the one she'd left on the counter 2 days ago. "You forgot this again," I said. She blinked, confused. "Okay, thanks." Then I added, softly, "Next time you go to the Amber Light Inn, maybe don't leave your charger behind." The color drained from her face instantly. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. The silence between us thickened, charged. "What did you say?" she whispered. "You heard me." She looked away for a second, her mind scrambling for a lie. I could see it. Then she met my eyes again. "You followed me." "I followed my wife," I said quietly, "because I stopped recognizing her." She stood up slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. "Alex, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice shaking. "Tell me what the hell I'm supposed to think when you sneak into hotels with another man and tell me you're at yoga." Her mouth opened, then closed. Tears welled up, but I saw it, not guilt, not sorrow, but fear being exposed. How long? I demanded. She didn't answer. How long, Maya? Her chin trembled. 1.5 years. I laughed, a sound that didn't sound human. Try to. I saw the messages. Her eyes widened, and that's when the tears finally came. She sank down onto the couch, covering her face. I didn't mean for it to happen, she sobbed. Then why didn't you stop? I shouted. 2 years. 2 years you lied to me, slept next to me, pretended everything was fine. I was lonely, she said through tears. You were always gone, always buried in work. I tried to talk to you. Don't you dare make this about me. I'm not, she cried. I don't know. He made me feel seen again. Her words hit me harder than I expected, because they were true. I had been distant, focused on work, chasing promotions, telling myself I was doing it for us. Maybe I thought love could be sustained by routine and history alone. But still, 2 years. That doesn't justify this, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. I know, Alex. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, I said. You killed something I'll never get back. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She sat there crying, and I stood by the doorway, my chest hollow. The house felt different now, colder, smaller. Finally, she said, I'll move out for a while, give you space. Where? I asked, bitterness creeping in. Amberlight in. Her face crumpled, and I turned away before I could see more. Just go, I muttered. She hesitated. Please, Alex. Go. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by the soft thud of the door closing. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever known. That night, I sat in the dark, surrounded by the fragments of a life I thought I understood. I kept seeing her face, the tears, the trembling lips, the excuses. And underneath it all, the truth, she hadn't been lonely. She'd been gone long before I ever realized it. I thought about calling Daniel again, about telling someone, anyone. But I didn't. I just poured another drink and stared at the empty side of the couch where she used to sit. When the clock struck midnight, I opened my laptop again. This time, I didn't look at her messages. I looked at mine, at all the times I texted her from airports, telling her I missed her. The messages were still there, read, replied to with hearts and emojis and lies. It hit me then. Our entire marriage had been a performance. Every memory I had was tainted by what I didn't know at the time. And I realized something even worse than her betrayal. Our marriage wasn't broken. It was fake. For 3 days, the house stayed silent. Her toothbrush was still in the holder, her coat still hanging by the door, but it felt like she'd been gone for years. The air had that strange stillness of a place abandoned too quickly. I didn't touch anything. I just walked from room to room like a ghost, retracing the map of our life, every photo, every memory, every promise now turned into a lie. She hadn't called. She hadn't texted. Not once. At first, I thought I'd feel relief that she was gone. But what came instead was something darker, a gnawing need to understand. Who was Ethan? Why him? What did he have that I didn't? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that moment outside the hotel, her smiling at him, laughing, touching his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. By the 4th day, the silence became unbearable. I needed answers. Not closure. I didn't even believe in that word anymore. But clarity. Something to make sense of the madness. So I started digging. It began with her emails. She'd forgotten to log out of her laptop. I opened the browser and saw the account still active. Most of it was work-related, project files, invoices, newsletters. But then I noticed one labeled personal inside a hidden folder. The messages inside weren't to Ethan. They were to herself. Journal entries. Hundreds of them. The earliest dated back almost 3 years. I opened the first one. I think I'm disappearing. He doesn't see me anymore. He's so busy, so tired, so far away even when he's next to me. I want to shake him and tell him I'm still here, but I don't know if he'd notice. My stomach twisted. Ethan's different. He listens. He looks at me like I matter. I know it's wrong, but for the first time in years, I feel alive. I wish I didn't. I wish Alex would look at me the way he used to. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the floor. Then I opened it again. I couldn't stop. I keep telling myself I'll end it, but then he texts me and I can't. I know I'm ruining everything. Maybe it's already ruined. Alex is leaving for New York next week. I told Ethan we could spend a night together without pretending anymore. I feel sick about it, but also, I can't wait. The dates align with one of my business trips. I felt like I was reading an autopsy report on my own marriage. Every entry was a cut, clean, and merciless. By the time I finished, the sun had gone down. My chest ached with a dull, steady pressure. I poured another glass of whiskey and stared at a photo on the wall, the one from our anniversary in Venice. Her eyes were shining in that picture, and I used to believe it was love. Now I couldn't tell if it was just guilt. I knew I should stop, delete everything, move on. But instead, I searched her email for his name. Ethan Carter. He worked at an architecture firm downtown. I clicked through his LinkedIn profile. Clean, professional, smiling in every photo. Married, one kid, a perfect little life that looked just as curated as ours once did. So that was it. She wasn't even the only one betraying someone. Something in me hardened. I wasn't going to sit around as a fool in this story. The next morning, I drove downtown. His office was in one of those glass towers where everyone looked too polished to be real. I waited outside in my car, watching through the windows until I saw him. He was exactly like his photos, tall, confident, charming in a way that felt rehearsed. The kind of man who probably never questioned his own worth. When he came out for lunch, I followed him into the cafe across the street. I waited until he got his coffee, then stepped up beside him. "Ethan Carter?" I asked. He looked up, polite confusion on his face. "Yeah, I'm Alex, Maya's husband." His face drained of color instantly. For a second, neither of us said a word. Then he swallowed, his jaw tightening. I think we should step outside." We walked out to the sidewalk. The city buzzed around us, but in that moment, all I could hear was my pulse hammering in my ears. He spoke first. "Look, Alex, I didn't." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't give me the speech. I just need to know one thing. Did you love her?" He hesitated, eyes flicking away. "I don't know." "That's not an answer." He sighed. "At first, maybe, but it wasn't what you think. She was lost. So was I." I laughed bitterly. "So you found each other in the wreckage? That's your justification." He flinched, then said quietly, "She told me you were never home, that she felt invisible." "I was building a future for us," I said. "Turns out I was just financing her affair." He didn't respond. Something in his eyes made me stop. There was guilt, yes, but also pity. That made it worse. "How long?" I asked. "Almost 2 years." "So she wasn't lying about that," I said softly. He shifted uncomfortably. "Look, it's over now. I ended it weeks ago. She didn't tell you that, did she?" My head snapped up. "What?" "She came to me crying," he continued, "said she couldn't keep living like that. She wanted to fix things with you." I stared at him, speechless. "She told me she loved you," he said, "even after everything." I felt like the ground had tilted. "And you believed her?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, because she meant it." For a moment, I didn't know whether to hit him or thank him. Then I just turned away. "You destroyed 2 lives," I said. "Maybe more. I hope it was worth it." "I'm sorry," he said quietly. But apologies meant nothing now. When I got back to the car, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel. If what he said was true, then Maya had tried to end it. But why didn't she tell me? Why keep pretending? That night, I got my answer. At 9:47 p.m., there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find her standing there, eyes red, hands trembling. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around like she was entering a place she no longer recognized. "I saw Ethan today," I said flatly. She froze. "You what?" "I wanted the truth." Her face twisted. "You had no right." I laughed. "No right? After what you did." Tears filled her eyes. "I ended it, Alex. Weeks ago. Before you found out. I wanted to fix things with you, but I didn't know how." "Fix what?" I snapped. "The corpse of a marriage you buried 2 years ago." She winced. "Please, stop." "I can't," I said. "I can't stop seeing it every time I look at you." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "I still love you." I stared at her, disbelief freezing me in place. "You don't get to say that." "It's true," she said, voice breaking. "I lost myself. I made a mistake, a terrible one, but I never stopped loving you." The worst part was that she sounded sincere. And maybe, deep down, some part of me still wanted to believe her. But belief wasn't enough anymore. I turned away. "You should go." Her voice cracked. "Please, Alex." "Go." She hesitated, then walked out quietly. The sound of the door closing was softer this time, but it hurt more than the first. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty, like someone had carved the heart out of me and left the shell standing. And for the first time, I realized the truth that had been waiting all along. Love doesn't die from betrayal. It dies from the silence that follows. I could barely recognize my own home anymore. Every creak in the hallway, every faint scent of a perfume, every misplaced mug in the kitchen felt like evidence. My house had become a crime scene of love. That night, after she had gone to sleep, I sat at the edge of our bed staring at the faint glow of her phone charging on the nightstand. My heart hammered in my chest so loudly I was afraid it would wake her. I wanted to grab the phone, scroll through messages, and confirm what I already knew. But I also knew that once I did, there would be no turning back. My hands trembled. The weight of years together, our vows, our laughter, the plans we once made, kept me frozen. But then her phone lit up with a notification. "Sweet dreams, Angel. Can't wait for tomorrow." The message burned itself into my mind. There was no name, just a heart emoji and a flame. My blood ran cold. I turned my gaze toward her sleeping face, peaceful and unbothered, and for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw a stranger wearing her skin. The next morning, I tried to act normal. She hummed while making coffee, wearing the same pink robe she'd worn the night I proposed. The sight of it used to fill me with warmth. Now it just made my stomach twist. "Morning, love," she said. I forced a smile. "Morning." She handed me a mug, kissed my cheek, and went back to scrolling through her phone. I stared at her reflection in the kitchen window, trying to catch any flicker of guilt, any micro-expression that would betray the truth. There was nothing. She looked content. I couldn't do it anymore. I needed proof, something undeniable. That afternoon, while she was out meeting a client, I followed her. I kept my distance, my heart thundering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Her car turned into a quiet side street near the river. She parked in front of a small cafe, got out, and waited. A few minutes later, a man stepped out of a silver BMW. Broad shoulders, neatly trimmed beard, expensive suit. He smiled at her. She smiled back, a smile that used to be mine. When she hugged him, my vision blurred. It wasn't a polite hug. It was long, intimate. She rested her head on his chest for a second, as if she belonged there. My fingers clenched around the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I wanted to storm out, to confront them both right there in the street, but I couldn't move. Instead, I watched. They went inside. They sat close. They laughed. Her hand brushed his. Every small touch was a knife. After an hour, they walked out again. He held the door open for her, his hand grazing her back. They got into his car and drove away. I followed them to a small boutique hotel on the edge of town. She looked around cautiously before going inside. I parked across the street and just sat there, the truth crashing down around me. My wife wasn't just cheating. She'd built an entire life behind my back. I don't remember driving home. I only remember walking inside, staring at the framed wedding photo on the living room wall. I tore it down, the glass shattering across the floor. The sound echoed like thunder in the empty house. For hours, I sat there in silence, surrounded by broken glass, until I heard her car pull up. She walked in, still glowing from whatever lie she'd just lived through. "Hey, you're home early." I looked at her, my voice barely steady. "Where were you?" She blinked. "I told you. Client meeting." "Which client?" She hesitated. "Mark. He's opening a new branch in." "Don't lie," I said, cutting her off. My tone was sharp enough to make her freeze. "I followed you." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I saw you. At the cafe. At the hotel." For a few seconds, the room went completely silent. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned everything else out. Then she laughed, softly, nervously. "You're overreacting. That's just business. Here's a client." "Do you take all your clients to hotels?" I asked quietly. Her face drained of color. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hands trembled slightly. "It was just a mistake. It's complicated." "A mistake?" I felt something snap inside me. 2 years, Claire. 2 years of meetings, messages, and lies. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then why didn't you stop?" She didn't answer. The silence between us grew thick, suffocating. I could see the truth in her face even before she spoke. "I was lonely," she whispered. "You were always busy, always distant. I needed someone who made me feel seen again." Her words hit harder than any confession. I had been working long hours, yes, but for us, for our future. And while I was breaking my back to give her stability, she found comfort in someone else's arms. I turned away, my voice breaking. "You could have talked to me. You didn't have to destroy everything." She started crying, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't bear her touch anymore. That night, she slept in the guest room. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of every lie pressing down on my chest. I thought about the man she'd been with, about the life she'd been living in secret, about the irony of our vows, till death do us part. I wondered if the version of me she loved had already died years ago, replaced by someone she could no longer stand. As dawn crept through the curtains, I realized something that hollowed me out completely. Our marriage hadn't just been damaged. It had been fake for years. I was the only one who didn't know it. And the worst part? I still loved her, even after everything. It was that love that kept me from throwing her out immediately. That love that made me cling to the faint hope that maybe, somehow, it could be fixed. But deep down, I knew the truth. Once trust dies, nothing real survives. And hers had been dead for a long time. The morning after her confession felt like standing in the ruins of a home after fire, everything still standing, yet charred beyond repair. Claire moved around the kitchen silently, avoiding my eyes. The usual clinking of cups and smell of coffee had once been comforting. Now it was unbearable. Every motion she made looked deliberate, as if she was afraid of breaking what was left between us. "I'll stay with my sister for a few days," she said quietly, not looking up. Her voice was small, almost rehearsed. I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything at all. She packed her bags in silence while I stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching the woman I thought I knew disappear one folded shirt at a time. When she zipped up the suitcase and finally looked at me, her eyes were swollen. Are you going to tell anyone?" she asked, voice trembling. I stared at her for a long moment. "Does it matter?" She swallowed hard. I don't want my family to hate me." That was a moment something inside me snapped again, not in anger, but in disbelief. She was worried about being judged, not about what she'd done to me. I turned away, my throat burning. "You should have thought about that before." She said nothing, just stood there, hands trembling against the suitcase handle, before finally walking out the door. The sound of it closing behind her felt like the final heartbeat of our marriage. For the next few days, I existed on autopilot. I went to work, came home, and sat in the silence. Her absence echoed through every corner of the house. I told no one. Not my friends, not my family. It was my private disaster. But silence can be cruel. It amplifies memories. Every room reminded me of something. Her laughter, her scent, the way she used to hum while cooking. And now, I couldn't tell which memories were real and which had been built on lies. One night, I sat scrolling through old photos. There she was, smiling at the beach, laughing in the rain, asleep on my shoulder during a movie. And in each picture, I searched for it, the look that would tell me when she started pretending. That's when I noticed something strange. A date in the photo gallery, 2 years ago, around the time she said the affair began. A picture of her in the same cafe I'd seen her at recently. But this time, she was alone, or so I thought. In the corner of the reflection, on the cafe window behind her, I saw him. The same man, same beard, same suit. The date said, anniversary lunch while his at work read hard hash. My stomach turned. That day, she told me she was meeting a friend for lunch because she didn't want to wait till evening to celebrate. I had even sent her a message saying, have fun, I'll make dinner tonight. She had been celebrating our anniversary with someone else. The realization made my skin crawl. How many moments had I cherished that were built on her deceit? How many nights had I slept beside her while she was texting him good night? I wanted answers, but she was gone. So I went looking. Her laptop was still in the study. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. At first, it was just emails and files. Then I found a folder labeled Work Presentations, Private. Inside were dozens of messages, photos, and chat screenshot with his name, David H. I opened one, then another, and another. Messages that read, he's asleep. I can't stop thinking about you. I feel like I'm living 2 lives. He deserves better, but I can't let go of you. I scrolled until my hands started shaking. Then I found a video file, just a few seconds long. My instinct screamed at me not to open it, but I did. It was them, in a hotel room, laughing, kissing, her voice whispering things she used to whisper to me. The laptop slipped from my hands and hit the floor. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, collapsing against the wall, gasping like a man drowning in memories. For hours, I just sat there, staring at nothing. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I thought I had already been broken, but this was something deeper. This was annihilation. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face anyone. I couldn't face the world. I deleted every message thread between us, every photo of her on my phone. But each deletion hurt, like tearing out a piece of my own flesh. Then, around noon, she called. I need to pick up a few things, she said. Her voice was hesitant. Come get them, I said flatly. When she arrived, I didn't even open the door all the way. She stepped inside slowly, her eyes red and tired. You've been looking through my things, she said softly. You left them here, I replied. She looked down, guilt spreading across her face. I didn't want you to find out like that. How should I have found out, Claire? I asked, my tone sharp. Should I have walked in on you again? Maybe at another hotel? Tears rolled down her cheeks. Please, stop. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. You recorded it. You kept it. You kept everything. Didn't you? You had a whole archive of your betrayal. She covered her face, sobbing. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It wasn't supposed to happen. You keep saying that. I whispered. But it did. Again and again. For 2 years. She sank to her knees on the living room floor, crying uncontrollably. I just stood there, feeling nothing. No pity, no anger, just emptiness. When she finally looked up at me, her voice broke. I ended it. Months ago. I swear. It's over. I laughed bitterly. You think that makes it better? I still love you, she whispered. The words hung in the air like a cool joke. I stared at her for a long moment before saying, No, you love the version of me that doesn't exist anymore. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I turned away. So am I. When she left again that night, I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to, because this time I knew she wasn't coming back. The silence that followed was heavy, but different. It wasn't the silence of waiting. It was the silence of something truly ending. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath all the pain and betrayal, I felt the first spark of something new. Freedom. But freedom, I was about to learn, can be just as haunting as love. Freedom. The word sounded hollow at first, like an echo in a house stripped bare. After Claire left for good, I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt weightless in the worst possible way, like gravity had let go of me. The first few mornings were the hardest. I'd wake up instinctively expecting to hear her voice in the kitchen, the sound of the kettle, her laughter through the hallway. But there was nothing, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. Silence had a new texture now. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Her absence filled every corner like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I stopped cooking. I stopped answering calls. I'd sit on the couch staring at the blank TV screen, replaying every conversation, every look, every lie. I started noticing all the signs I'd ignored. The sudden work trips. The perfume that wasn't mine on her clothes. The way she used to turn her phone face down when a message came in. She wasn't hiding them well. I was just choosing not to see them. That realization made me sick. I'd been complicit in my own betrayal. One evening, as the sunset burned through the living room window, I poured myself a drink, a bad habit I'd avoided for years. The amber liquid swirled in the glass, catching the last light of day. I took a long sip, hoping it would dull the ache. It didn't. I found myself scrolling through my phone, landing on a chat thread I hadn't opened in years. Liam, my best friend. We hadn't talked much lately. I typed, "You were right." His reply came fast. "About what?" "About her." A few seconds passed. Then, "What happened?" "She's been cheating. For 2 years." Typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then came back. "I'm sorry, man. I didn't know how to tell you before." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" He replied, "I saw them once, at a restaurant downtown. I thought maybe I was mistaken, or maybe it was a work thing. You look happy. I didn't want to be the one to ruin that." I put the phone down, feeling my chest tighten again. Even my best friend had seen it. Everyone probably had. I was the only fool left in the dark. Everyone knew but me. I muttered to the empty room. The words felt poisonous. A few days later, I got a message from an unknown number. It was short. "You don't deserve what you did. You should know the full story. Meet me tomorrow, 7 p.m., Old Riverside Cafe." No name, no context. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something about it tugged at me. The cafe mentioned was the same one where I'd first caught sight of Claire and her lover. I couldn't shake the curiosity or the dread. The next evening, I drove there. The place looked different now, emptier, colder. The waitress didn't even recognize me, though I'd been here once before watching my life fall apart through the window. I sat at a corner table, back to the wall, eyes scanning the room. At 7:10, a woman walked in. She was in her early 30s, dark hair tied back, sharp eyes that carried exhaustion. She spotted me immediately and came over. "You're Ethan," she said. "Yes." She sat down, her expression unreadable. "I'm Anna, David's ex." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "David," I repeated slowly. "The man who—" She nodded. "The man your wife was seeing." The air between us went still. "I don't want to make this harder for you," she said, her voice calm but trembling slightly. "But you deserve to know the truth. They didn't just meet by accident. It wasn't random." My heart thudded. "What do you mean?" She leaned forward. "Claire met David through me. We worked together. We had a small dinner one night. She came as my guest. That's when it started. I didn't realize what was happening until months later. I confronted David, but he lied, said it was nothing. Eventually, I found messages, same ones, I'm sure, that you saw." I clenched my fists. And you didn't think to tell me. Her expression twisted with guilt. I tried. I wanted to. But Claire begged me not to. She said she'd end it. She said you didn't need to know. I let out a shaky laugh. She was protecting herself, not me. Anna looked down. She was good at pretending. They both were. We sat in silence for a while, two strangers bound by betrayal. The rain outside began to fall softly, tapping against the windows like a metronome of grief. After a while, she said quietly, I thought you should also know David's married. To me. My head jerked up. What? She nodded slowly. We were still married. I found out about Claire 6 months before you did. He promised he'd end it. He didn't. So, it wasn't just me. 2 marriages destroyed by the same lie. Anna sighed, her voice brittle. They kept saying it was love, that what they had was real. But it wasn't. It was just 2 people trying to escape their own emptiness. Her words cut deep because they were true, for both of them. For us. As she stood to leave, she looked at me with something like pity. You're lucky, you know. You found out. You can start over. Some people never get that chance. I watched her walk away through the glass, disappearing into the rain. I sat there long after she left, her words echoing in my mind. You can start over. But how do you start over when the person you were was built around someone else? When I finally drove home, the street shimmered under the rain. The windshield wipers beat in rhythm with my pulse. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older, harder, like someone who'd been forced to grow up overnight. Back home, I poured myself another drink and opened my notebook, the one Claire had gifted me years ago when I'd said I wanted to start writing again. The first page had her handwriting on it, for the man who sees beauty even in pain. I tore that page out. Then I started writing, not for her, not about her, but for myself. The words poured out like blood, everything I'd felt, everything I'd lost, every lie that had poisoned me. And somewhere between the lines, I found something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. The truth was, my marriage wasn't just fake because of her lies. It was fake because I had built it on blind devotion. I had loved her more than myself, and that was my mistake. As the ink dried on the last sentence, I realized I was finally ready to stop bleeding for her. I woke the next morning with a strange calm in my chest. The kind of calm that only comes after you cried every tear, yelled every word, and run out of ways to hurt. The house was still, sunlight spilling across the floor in long streaks that cut through the quiet. For the first time in months, I didn't feel suffocated by the silence. I made coffee, black, no sugar, no cream, just like I used to before Claire started insisting we add a little sweetness. I sat by the window, watching the street below, the world continuing as if nothing had happened. It struck me how indifferent life was to personal tragedies. The sun still rose. The mail still came. My heart had broken, but the world didn't care. Maybe that was the point. I opened my notebook again. The pages from the night before stared back at me, raw, angry, unpolished. But they were honest. I hadn't written for years, not since the early days of our marriage when she'd said she loved my words. Maybe I stopped because, in a way, I'd been writing for her approval, not my truth. Now I wrote for me. Days passed, then weeks. I didn't reach out to Claire. She didn't call. The world between us stretched wide until it became impossible to cross. But occasionally, I'd see her name flash on my phone. Missed call, then silence. She left voicemails I couldn't bring myself to listen to. It was a Sunday afternoon when she finally showed up at the house. No warning. I opened the door and there she was, hair tied up, face pale, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept in days. "Ethan," she said softly. I didn't move. "Why are you here?" "I just need to talk." "Please." I hesitated before stepping aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the room like she was seeing a memory she'd broken. "I'm not here to beg," she said, her voice unsteady. "I just need to explain." "You've already explained," I said quietly. "Twice." "I know," she whispered, "but you don't understand what really happened." I almost laughed. "There's not much left to misunderstand, Claire." She shook her head, tears forming again. "It wasn't just about him. It wasn't about love. It was about me. I felt empty for so long, and I didn't know why. I tried to fill it with him, with attention, with anything, but it was never about you. You didn't deserve what I did. Her words came out in broken gasps, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I used to love. Not the liar, not the betrayer, but the fragile soul underneath it all. I ruined us, she said, voice cracking, and I live with that every day. I wish I could undo it, but I can't. You were good to me, too good, and I didn't know how to be good back. I stared at her, torn between pity and anger. Why now, Claire? Why come back? Because I couldn't stand the thought that you hate me. I exhaled slowly. I don't hate you. Her eyes widened slightly. You don't? No, I said, shaking my head. Hate would mean you still have a hold on me. I let go. She looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. I deserve that. For a long moment, we stood there in silence, two ghosts in the same room, mourning something that had already died. When she finally turned to leave, she paused at the door. He's gone, she said softly. David. He moved overseas with his wife. She took him back. Good for them, I said, my tone flat. She hesitated. Goodbye, Ethan. I nodded. Goodbye, Claire. And just like that, she was gone. For real this time. That night, I sat on the back porch with a beer in hand, staring at the fading twilight. The world looked different, simpler somehow. My thoughts drifted to everything I had lost, and then to everything I hadn't noticed I still had. My freedom, my voice, my peace. I went inside, pulled out my notebook again, and kept writing. But this time, I didn't write about pain. I wrote about survival, about rediscovering who I was beneath all the broken pieces she'd left behind. As the days turned into months, I started to rebuild. I went back to the gym, reconnected with friends I'd pushed away, even took up photography, something I'd always wanted to do but never found time for. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again, or maybe a new version of myself, scarred, but stronger. Then one afternoon, as I was walking through the park with my camera, I saw something that stopped me. A couple sitting on a bench, laughing, their hands intertwined. The woman leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a moment I felt the old sting of envy, but it passed quickly, replaced by a quiet acceptance. Love wasn't evil. It just wasn't permanent. I took a picture of them. The frame was beautiful. Sunlight through trees, soft smiles, unguarded emotion. When I looked at it later, I realized it wasn't about them. It was about me learning to see beauty again, even in moments that weren't mine. Weeks later, I self-published a small collection of short pieces, reflections, fragments, thoughts I'd written during those sleepless nights. I titled it The Shape of an Empty House. I didn't expect anyone to read it, but somehow people did. The messages started trickling in, strangers thanking me for putting into words what they couldn't. People who'd been betrayed, abandoned, or broken in their own ways. Each message reminded me that pain connects us more deeply than love ever could, and maybe that was the real purpose behind all of it. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find your truth. That night, I closed my notebook and looked around my quiet, half-empty home. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like peace. I whispered into the darkness, not as a goodbye, but as a release. Thank you, Claire. Because without her lies, I'd never have found my truth. The months that followed carried an unfamiliar lightness, as if some invisible weight had finally slipped off my shoulders. I began to move differently, slower, more deliberate, but with purpose. My mornings no longer started with checking my phone or waiting for messages that would never come. They started with coffee, music, and the quiet rhythm of my thoughts. It was early spring when I first heard from Leah again. She was a woman from the bookstore, the one who had quietly seen through me without asking questions. She sent a simple message. Your book found me. I didn't know you could bleed ink like that. I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. We began talking again, this time not as strangers bound by shared loneliness, but as two people rebuilding themselves from different ruins. She told me about her move to a small apartment near the coast, about how she'd started painting again. I told her about the book, about the messages I'd been getting, about how strange it felt to be seen by people who didn't know me. "Maybe that's the safest way to be seen," she wrote one night. "Through honesty, not history." Her words stuck with me. By summer, I decided to visit the coast. It wasn't for her, not exactly. I told myself I needed a break, a place to breathe somewhere new. But part of me knew I wanted to see her. The sea was everything I hoped it would be, endless, untamed, and alive. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. I found her standing near the waterline, hair pulled back, sunlight catching on her skin. She turned and smiled like she'd been expecting me all along. "I knew you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure until I did," I replied. We walked for hours, our conversation meandering like the tide, soft, unhurried, and strangely easy. There were pauses, but they weren't uncomfortable. They were the kind that come when silence feels like a language of its own. At one point, she stopped and looked at me. "Do you still think about her?" I took a long breath. "Sometimes. Not because I miss her, but because I'm learning from what she broke." Leah nodded. Then maybe she served her purpose. That night, we sat by a bonfire near the beach. The flames flickered between us, painting our faces in amber light. She pulled her knees close, her voice barely louder than the crackle of wood. "I used to think betrayal was the end of everything," she said. "Now I think it's the start of something raw. Real." I looked at her, realizing she understood something I'd only begun to grasp. "Pain clears the noise," I said. "What's left afterward, that's who we really are." She smiled faintly. "Then who are you now, Ethan?" I thought about it. About all the nights I spent dissecting memories, about the moments of peace that had started to find me again. "Someone who's finally learning to live without needing to be loved," I said. The waves crashed softly behind us, and for the first time, I didn't feel haunted by the sound. We spent the next few days exploring the coastline, talking, laughing, sometimes saying nothing at all. She showed me her paintings, oceans in motion, skies full of wild color, small figures standing alone in vast landscapes. "That one's me," she said, pointing to a tiny silhouette on the edge of a cliff, learning to exist without falling. "And this one?" I asked, nodding to another. She smiled. "That one might be you, still deciding whether to jump or fly." I didn't realize how much I needed that. Someone who saw me not as broken, but as unfinished. When I left the coast, I promised I'd come back. But neither of us called it anything more than what it was, a connection, gentle and unforced. Maybe it didn't need to become something more. Maybe healing was enough. Back home, I started a new project. Not a book this time, a podcast. Echoes of Silence. I recorded short episodes about betrayal, grief, and rediscovery, reading excerpts from letters people sent me. Each story felt like a piece of someone else's healing stitched into mine. The show grew quietly, spreading through word of mouth, reaching others who needed to hear that their pain wasn't permanent. Some even sent voice messages, sharing their own stories of forgiveness and closure. One evening, as I was editing an episode, I received an email from Claire. I hadn't heard from her in almost a year. The subject line simply read, "Thank you." Her message was short. "I read your book. I saw myself in it, and it hurt, but it also helped me understand what I destroyed. You were right to let go. I hope you found peace. I'm still trying to." For a long time, I just stared at the screen. Then I smiled faintly, closed the laptop, and whispered, "I already did." The next morning, I went back to the park where I'd taken that photo months ago, the couple on the bench. This time, the bench was empty. The leaves had turned gold and scattered across the ground. I sat there for a while, camera resting in my lap, and felt an odd kind of contentment. The world keeps moving, I thought, and so do we. As the sun began to dip, I took one last picture, the bench bathed in warm light, surrounded by silence. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. That night, I printed the photo and hung it above my desk. Underneath, I wrote a single line. Sometimes, letting go is the most faithful thing you can do. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. about learning that endings don't always mean failure. Sometimes they are just the beginning of a different story. The night I finished the last episode of Echoes of Silence, I sat in my apartment surrounded by scattered notebooks and half-empty coffee cups. The sound of rain against the window filled the quiet like a metronome. I played the recording back one last time, my voice steady but soft. We can spend years building a life on word we want to believe. Promises, vows, futures. But sometimes the truth isn't what we lost. It's what we finally stopped pretending to have. I hit upload and watched the progress bar crawl forward. That simple blue line carried months of pain, reflection, and rebuilding. I thought of Claire again, not with anger anymore, but with a calm that comes after a long storm. Somewhere out there, she was probably listening too. Maybe she'd hear it as forgiveness. Maybe as goodbye. A week later, I received an invitation from a local radio host who wanted to feature the podcast. They'd read my book and said my story had helped others find their way through betrayal. It was surreal, turning my own unraveling into something that made sense to other people. At the studio, I spoke about everything: grief, trust, healing. But when the host asked if I'd ever love again, I hesitated. "I think so," I said finally, "but not like before. Not with blind faith. Love, I've learned, isn't about possession or permanence. It's about presence, about showing up and meaning it, even if it ends." The interview went viral. Messages flooded my inbox, some thanking me for my honesty, others confessing their own stories of betrayal. It reminded me that pain, no matter how private it feels, always connects us. Months passed, and the air turned cooler again. Fall crept in quietly, painting the trees in rust and gold. I visited my parents for the first time since the divorce. My mother hugged me longer than usual, her eyes wet with pride and something unspoken. My father, usually quiet, simply patted my shoulder and said, "You came through it stronger." I smiled. Maybe I had. One evening, I was out walking near the same lake where I'd once sat and discovered Claire's betrayal. The water was still, mirroring the faint shimmer of city lights. I stopped by the bench, our bench once, and for a fleeting second, I saw my reflection double beside Hayes, the way it used to be. But when I blinked, it was just me, and that was enough. Leah's name lit up my phone. "You won't believe this," she wrote. "A gallery wants to feature my paintings next month. They said they saw something in the emotion, the movement, said it felt alive." I grinned, typing back, "You are alive. I'm proud of you." "You should come," she replied. "It'd be good to see a familiar face among all the new ones." For a while, I stared at her message. I didn't know what our story was meant to be, but maybe it didn't need a label. Maybe connection didn't have to fit inside expectations. "Send me the date," I finally texted. "I'll be there." The night of the gallery arrived crisp and cool. The city lights reflected in puddles along the cobblestone street. Inside, the walls were lined with Leah's art, oceans that looked like movement caught in stillness, storms painted in color instead of chaos. When she spotted me, her face lit up. We hugged, quietly, without words. It wasn't the beginning of a romance or the continuation of one. It was two people acknowledging that they had helped each other survive something painful. "This one's new," she said, leading me to a painting near the center. It showed two figures standing on opposite cliffs, a river of gold running between them. "It's called Faith in Distance." I studied it, my throat tightening. "It feels like peace," I said. She smiled. "That's what I wanted it to be." We spent the evening talking about art, about her journey, about mine. She laughed easily, and for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for disappointment or betrayal. I was simply there. When I left, she walked me to the door. "You look lighter," she said softly. "I feel it," I replied. We hugged once more before I stepped out into the night. The city hummed around me, alive, unpredictable, beautiful. As I walked home, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the heartbreak, the slow crawl back towards something like peace. I realized that betrayal doesn't just destroy, it transforms. It strips away illusions until only the truth remains. And maybe that's what real love is, Not the kind you build to look perfect, but the kind that survives when perfection dies. When I reached my apartment, I opened the window. The night air smelled of rain and possibility. My desk light flickered softly against the walls covered with photos, notes, and a single framed line beneath the picture of the park bench. Sometimes, letting go is the most faithful thing you can do. I smiled at it, not as a reminder of loss, but as a promise to myself to never settle for a love that required blindness to survive. I sat down, opened my notebook, and began to write again. Not about betrayal this time. About beginnings. About the quiet strength of those who rebuild from ashes. And for the first time in a long while, the words didn't hurt to write. They felt like freedom.